All right, Theo Ouyang and William Mayville are with us today, and we are so excited to have these students. In fact, Theo, this is your second time meeting with us. And so the last time we met, I believe we spoke a little bit about some of your advocacy work. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about your focus on engineering with your FlipSat, a cube satellite that you are hoping to have launched soon. And of course, we'll be meeting with William Mayville, your teammate as well, after your interview to kind of talk about some of the necessary funding mechanisms that seem to be lacking for students who are interested in building cube satellites. So let's start off today with introducing yourself a little bit more to the audience, sharing out, how you got involved in the Wolfpack and how you came to find a space in space.
All right, hi, I'm Theodore Ouyang, as you said. I've been part of the Wolfpack since about fifth grade, and then I came up with the idea of the FlipSat 1 in the seventh grade. And I've been working on the project since then, but we've been denied for funding. We sent funding proposals to NASA's CubeSat launch initiative multiple times, but we've been denied in seventh and eighth grade for me. So it's been kind of sad for the FlipSat 1. But now the FlipSat 1 will be able to launch as a half-U hosted payload, thanks to the Wolf C that William will talk about.
I was just going to say, we talked about it was sad for the FlipSat and you weren't selected twice, but we have to remember, are middle school and high school students usually applying for CubeSat proposals?
No,
they're not, right? So you're up against schools like MIT and all of that. So it's not an insult that it hasn't been selected. It's just more evidence about why, if we want to make CubeSats something that we see in every classroom or more classrooms, more evidence as to why we need programs to help fund those missions.
Right. And I'll share, Theo, you were the first kid to lead a paper that was accepted. We had two young ladies go to Germany and speak at IAC in 2018, but they were really minor contributors to an adult paper, but you really led and wrote the first paper that we had accepted at the International Astronautical Congress. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that experience? Because I believe you were in the seventh grade. Is that right, when you presented that?
Either the end of seventh grade, I think it was the beginning of eighth grade.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you share a little bit about your paper, even back then on an international stage?
Yeah, it was about the FlipSat 1 then too. It was about our current progress of the FlipSat 1 and also the educational background of it. The International Astronautical Congress at that time was hosted in Washington, D.C. So myself and then two other members of the FlipSat 1, we flew up there along with the rest of the Wolfpack. And then prior to our presentation, we were able to meet a bunch of people in industry, make contacts and gain information that would be helpful with the FlipSat 1. And then later we presented about the FlipSat 1 to a group of people on an educational panel.
You even spoke about that in Dubai in the IAC last year, right?
Yes, I did.
So what I love is that, we look in some respects, you're like, oh, it didn't get accepted. And yet you have this incredibly large body of work that you've been able to take your research, your kind of vision, and now it's coming to fruition in a different way. So it's almost like this really good example of how we don't give up, how we take what we're interested in and we make it a long-term project, right? And then somehow you're also finding a way to see it through differently than what you originally expected, right?
Yeah.
How have you managed to stay interested in something that seems to just be constantly being put off for you? How have you found that within yourself to kind of just keep going and use that?
Well, I've always liked space. So it's a general interest for it. And then also it's fascinating work, the research that I want to do with the FlipSat 1. So it's just I want to know more about it. So that's the drive to keep on going.
Right. And I believe, were you with us at the White House and MIT and NASA headquarters? I mean, you have literally traveled the world and to the highest levels in the United States as far as academia and government in discussing your work. Did you enjoy that along the way? I mean, we all know you worked hard.
I did enjoy it a lot, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about the FlipSat then. And so for our listeners, let's have them understand a little bit about what its mission seeks to do.
All right, so in space, there's radiation that is emitted from the sun and also from the Big Bang. And usually that radiation is found as beta particles. And when that hits an electronic, it changes the code within it. So if you're familiar with binary code, the ones and zeros found within computers, when the when the beta radiation particles hit the electronic, it changes the binary code. So a 1 can become a 0, or a 0 can become a 1. And this code always translates to something within like the underlying system of the satellite. And this can cause total mission failure for the satellite if the code changes abruptly. So it's really important that these bit flips or single event upsets caused by the radiation doesn't happen. So FlipSat 1 seeks to investigate the various types of radiation hardening to prevent this. So we're going to be testing physical shielding, where we basically just cover the sample chips with polyethylene. And polyethylene is a type of material that we've chosen due to some chemistry aspects of it. It's a high hydrogen count, and this hydrogen would prevent the beta particles from getting through it. And then we're also testing error correcting code, where within the code, we're reading through the binary code and then seeing if we think a single event update has occurred, and then using some form of autocorrect, code version of it to fix it. And then the final method.
How quickly would that happen, the fixing of that? Like how quickly would it recognize a flip has occurred and correct?
Well, really quick. It's basically a couple lines of code for that. We use, for viewers that are familiar with it, we are using a parity bit. So we add up the first 7 bits in a 8-bit sequence, a byte. And then once we add up those first 7 bits, if it's even, we put a 0 at the end of that sequence. And if it's odd, we put a 1 at the end of the sequence. And then when the computer reads it and reads the first 7 bits, if those first 7 bits don't add up to an even amount, yet the final number still says a 0, then we know a single event upset has occurred. And we will have every byte sequence that we will have a known library of bytes that we've used. And since we have a known library of bytes that we've used, we can use this thing called forward error correction, where we rewrite the byte to whatever known byte is closest.
That's great.
Yeah.
If for our listeners that may have no idea what you just said, imagine you had a recipe for a meal you wanted to prepare, but somebody had jumbled up the letters and the words, how difficult it would be to execute that task. And what you're doing is finding ways to recognize when a mistake has been made, fix it on the fly so that the program still executes successfully, or you're able to cook the meal properly. So excellent.
That's impressive.
Theo, tell us a little bit about where you are in life as far as what you're doing, we obviously know your interest in space and you're excelling there, but what about the other parts of Theo that aren't just FlipSat? What's going on with respect to that? And maybe what are you hoping to do in the future?
Well, I'm currently a rising junior at Suncoast High School. I have some like out of school hobbies. Most of them are water based. Since it's Florida, I love to be around the water. And then further down the line, I'm not 100% sure what I want to go into yet. It's either going to be aerospace engineering or law.
Yeah, you could do space law, right? That's like my eyes were really open when we went on that MIT trip. So you've actually started kind of a subgroup of the Wolfpack there at Suncoast as well, who are helping you to build the FlipSat. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so like that's exciting. You think about what you've done with your resume as a middle schooler and what you're doing now as a high schooler. You're just kind of continuing to expand with initial little love that started somewhere, and now you're taking that to other people as well. Like you've really become an owner in that passion that you have, and I think that's really commendable for you as well. So
right now, did you with your Suncoast, your classmates, how did you target those you wanted to recruit? Did you say I only need coders, or I'm only going to take the kids that know me, or did you reach out to an existing club? How did you decide this is the talent pool that we need to best execute this task?
A lot of it was word of mouth and social media. So I just talked to a lot of students. And at Suncoast, I'm part of the MSc program, which is math, science, engineering. And a lot of students there are very technically based. And there's other programs there, such as CS, which is computer science. So I have a great group of engineering and coding kids. So I could just reach out to them and just go around and talk to people, even if I don't know them. And then I tell them about my project. And once they heard about it, they immediately wanted to join. So I gave them a time and a location. And then they told their friends, and then they just showed up.
So there's an educational need at your school probably true of other schools as well. And this is going to kind of be our segue into your teammate, William. So if we wanted to use, why would CubeSats be something that are important to be used in education, like from your perspective? And then ultimately, what's the problem with why don't we do them more? So that will lead into William.
All right, well, CubeSats were developed to make education more accessible to make space more accessible for students. So they're smaller and they're cheaper, and they can be completed in a smaller time frame. So they were originally developed for university students, and they're applicable to middle school and high school students. But due to the size and the cost, sometimes there's issues with funding and also what's in the time frame mechanism. And also, there's not that much resources available to students that aren't even at the university level. So that's what Williams seeks to
And they've
combat.
been dependent mostly on NASA's CubeSat launch initiative, which does give, if you're awarded, and it's only one, like, or maybe is it a few schools? Is it one school that they?
No, it varies. It could be as far as 10 nationally, and I think one year maybe they had about 24.
Right, but the idea of choosing middle schools is almost unheard of. I think there's only been 2 now. You guys were the first. And there have been 1 more since then.
Yeah, but it's unfair, right? We can't really duke it out with Georgia Tech and MIT and
Stanford. Not just that, it's not like it's still affordable. I mean, like, how much did you still have to raise, even with NASA's contribution? Like, could you just briefly share the cost of these, even though we say they're less costly, right?
Yeah, well, it's like tens of thousands of dollars for each satellite.
I could hear that the WISeSat was right around $100,000 for our money, but
after CubeSat launching.
Right, NASA contributed probably 150 towards our 250.
So it's like 300,000 to launch. NASA would provide a half. You've got to raise the other. That it makes it almost impossible, particularly for the public school sector. You know, kids who might not otherwise have access. Forget about the idea of whether they even have, you know, teachers who can kind of inspire that learning or a curriculum around CubeSats that, you know, specifically. So that's why we needed to have, for your amazing project, it had nothing to do with whether or not it was worthy of selection. It was just a matter of the luck of the draw. So how do we create that for everybody else? So I'm really excited to be seeing what's. I've known you for so long, back in I think when you were in elementary school, and now you're about to graduate. And just
I'll share a little background for our listeners that may not know. Theo mentioned aerospace engineering or law, but what I know is that he was a very good debate student, and so I'm not surprised that you were able to, you know, employ your people skills, your communication skills to easily recruit. Recruit the team members that you needed. So that's an advantage of having good people skills, right? He's
worked on every aspect. He did all the advocacy stuff too. I'm not sure that there's something that we've done that you haven't actually taken advantage of it for your to your testament. I mean, like, it's smart thinking. All right, well, Theo, thank you so much. We're going to turn this over now to William, who's going to share a little bit more about the WolfC, which is going to be the funding mechanism, which is actually now taking your CubeSat into space. When do we expect it to launch? When is our goal, by the way, before we kick it over?
End of this year or beginning of next year.
All right, so 2022, 2023, that's soon.
Yeah, I can say I signed the launch service agreement. It's going to be first quarter 2023.
That's amazing, Theo.
And by the way, Theo, we were in Indiana this week, and I literally saw, I didn't put my hands on it, I literally saw the troop carrier where your payload will fit right in.
Didn't they sign something? They signed their names on something.
Actually, Theo, we got to sign the back of the solar panel. So we all signed our names to the device that's going to carry FlipSat into space. So on the back of the solar panel. So it's good time.
How does it feel with this all coming together? I know we keep saying it's the end, but like, how does that feel for you? It's finally coming together.
It's exciting. Yeah, it's been a long time in the works.
Sure.
Yeah, I remember it was just a few years ago. We were in a clean tent in Seattle, and you were helping to integrate WISeSat. So this really is your second satellite, right? Your second spacecraft. So it's got to look good on a college application.
This is his baby. This is a big deal.
I agree.
All right, Theo, thanks for spending your morning with us. So we look forward to seeing you, obviously, in Athens, and and just in general as you continue to grow.
Thanks, Theo.
William Mayville, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. You know, we were just listening to your teammate Theo talk a little bit about his idea with the FlipSat. And so tell us a little bit, before you tell us about the way you're kind of fitting in with that, tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Wolfpack and how you kind of got to be involved in space.
Sure. So I've been involved with the Wolfpack and its predecessor organization since the 5th grade. I actually wanted to join in the 3rd grade, but I wasn't able to, obviously due to age. But when I was eventually able to join, it was an amazing experience, and I felt that it was very valuable at that young age to develop not just knowledge about satellites and aerospace, but also to present at conferences, events, learn how to network and interact with industry professionals. And those are all very valuable skills that have benefited me greatly in the years since. And then throughout middle school, I was able to continue my involvement in the Wolfpack and its predecessor organizations, eventually submitting a proposal of my own to NASA's CubeSat launch initiative. Unfortunately, that was rejected. However, despite that, I persevered on, and I had a great year, my final year of middle school, 8th grade. And now I'm in high school, I'm a rising junior. I've continued my involvement in aerospace and with the Wolfpack CubeSat development team.
Yes, I think the highlight of your middle school, were you not one of our White House speakers?
Yes, I was on that trip to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and I also gave a presentation about my proposal at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
That's
right. That's very good. And that, if I recall correctly, not only did you present to the director of OSTP at the White House, but also the Space Technology, National Space Technology Council Director, Dr. Scott Pace. So Dr. Kelvin Drogenmeier was there and Dr. Scott Pace.
William, I know you said a little bit about how something wasn't selected, and that seems to be, obviously we don't get selected every time. We're lucky that when we do. What did you learn though in the process, even though your proposal was not selected? What were some of the valuable skills that you learned from the process that led you ultimately to kind of want to be in this entrepreneurial facet that you're in?
Well, I'd say the most valuable skill was team management, because up to that point, I had mostly been a team member and a high-ranking member of teams, but I never really led a team of my own with little oversight. And as such, the ability to lead a team really resulted in a lot of skill development in terms of leadership that was incredibly valuable to me. And I want to kind of use those skills greatly in the years since they benefited me substantially. I found that, and I believe that the leadership skills I developed through that proposal were probably the most important.
Well, so now let's move a little bit ahead to how you kind of shifted from the idea of maybe building and launching CubeSats to actually funding them. Tell our listeners a little bit about why what you're doing is needed, and then give us a little bit of a summary about that program.
And your motivation for doing it.
Yeah.
Sure. So I've been involved with aerospace and these programs for many years. I've never really been a science guy. I've always been more fascinated by the humanities, business, in those fields. So I always kind of felt like a fish out of water, so to speak. However, when an opportunity presented itself for me to create an entrepreneurial project to solve a pressing problem in a field that I found to be very interesting, I jumped at the opportunity. Because we see in the status quo, the WCDT has submitted, and its predecessor and affiliate organizations have probably submitted about 12 proposals to NASA, approximately 2 of which have been accepted. That is 1/6. All proposals were technically credible and considerably viable. However, due to the very nature of the currently existing programs for CubeSat funding at the secondary level, they simply couldn't be accepted. This is the case for a few reasons. First, because such programs pit middle and high school students against university students at top institutions such as MIT, as well as federally funded research institutions. And this disparity is quite obviously puts the students at the secondary level at a major disadvantage. Second, in addition to that, these students are competing for a very limited number of spots, usually approximately 10 to 20. Often we see the third is that the selection guidelines are based on on the missions that best fit NASA's interests and NASA's objectives. And of course, this is a NASA-run program, and that is their prerogative to put such guidelines in place, but it prevents technically and educationally viable and important missions from being launched and conducted simply due to factors that are really out of the control of students.
So what you're looking at then isn't so much, okay, so yeah, sometimes projects are not selected based on maybe the viability of the project itself, but you're looking at the issue that there are probably a lot of people out there who could do something like this, but they just don't have the funding to do so, right?
Right, and that was a major problem that we encountered with a lot of proposals, that that the program requires that you have to have evidence of funding, and that's quite obviously the reason why it's quite obvious. However, the problem with that is that at the secondary level, the funds simply don't exist. In schools where there's a difficult time getting qualified teachers, basic technology, and adequate textbooks, there's no chance of those students, despite potentially being fully capable of doing such projects, engaging in real-world aerospace like CubeSats, which is why I created a program, which is essentially a competitive grant system. And the goal of this is one goal of this is to alleviate the funding barrier to real aerospace at the secondary level, and giving these students an opportunity to develop not just technical skills, but also, as I mentioned earlier, 21st century skills such as communications, leadership, critical thinking, innovation.
Right. And so even as you're saying, I'm agreeing with you, because even a very, very good middle or high school proposal really isn't the same caliber as an average engineering university, a program at a university, much less your Georgia Tech's, your Naval Academy, UC Boulder, a number of schools in California and other places. So that it's just a lack of funding at the national level, right? NASA doesn't have the funding for all the good proposals.
Right.
So you found the need, and tell us a little bit about the solution that you have come up with to this important need.
There's actually a two-pronged solution in regards to aerospace at the secondary level. The first of which is more of a short-term solution, and that's solving the funding problem. To do this, we plan on announcing a competitive grant. This competitive grant will pay for the launch and testing of the accepted missions, well, the winning missions, I should say. There are currently 3 tiers for this planned system. The first of which is a submission of an abstract, essentially highlights the details of a mission and provides a general overview that allows initial viability as well as a team profile to be determined and evaluated. The second stage is a technical paper and a more fully developed proposal. This allows for a further technical analysis of the mission to make sure that it's something that can withstand the rigors of space and has an important scientific and educational contribution. The third component is slightly different from what is normal, and that is a quote-unquote pitch fest, where students come and present live pitches in teams. And the goal of this pitch fest is to develop public speaking, teamwork, and entrepreneurship skills that would otherwise go undeveloped. And the development of such skills is a critical component of the WolfC program.
Right. Have you decided that once you get the abstracts, then you will down select the number of full proposals? Or are you allowing, is your vision to see any high school student or any high school or middle school team submit a full proposal?
Well, of course, we need to start out smaller, as the amount of funds we have is limited. However, as we grow, become more reputable, and the amount of resources we have also in turn increases, then my goal is definitely to fund more and more projects. Of course, every student, unfortunately, cannot be funded at this time, and will that happen in the near future? Most likely not, as hard as we might want to try. So my goal is definitely to mitigate the problem. However, our goal is also to make sure that the best proposals are the ones that fly, given the resources that we have at hand.
But it makes sense too, like knowing you know your teammates, you know the work that Mr. Simmons has done, so you know the validity, or that's been proven by the Wolfpack team. So it makes sense that the first one that you're choosing to do is one that has actually not only been proposed, but has been researched thoroughly and seems to be well on its way. But let me ask you this. So you're a student yourself, right? You weren't as interested in the stuff that the other students were, and you've decided to create this kind of entrepreneurial, but also it's philanthropic at the same time, right? So how does someone, forget your age, just in general, if you want to go out and you want to kind of raise this kind of fund, how does someone like you, what are you doing to raise the funds? Let me just kind of put it that way, because you're actually out there from like a, is it like a nonprofit perspective, raising funds for this, and yet you're a student going into his junior year.
Sure. So I'm working with private investors as well as philanthropic organizations within the region. In addition to that, I'm also working with a number of established for us private sector partners, public sector partners, but I'm also working with similar partners that are more recent relationships, and I'm definitely looking forward to expanding those relationships, as I believe that there's a lot of potential in that area that I
You
certainly
meet them, I
hope to.
bet, in Athens when you go. You'll be able
Right.
to network.
Yes, yes.
I definitely, just to summarize our stakeholders that you've identified, they include private companies, they include private individuals, they include public entities. Basically, you will not discriminate against anyone that will write a check in support of the effort, right? I guess you should talk about the name of this philanthropic effort also, right?
Yes, it's the Wolfpack Orbital Launch Funding Competition, otherwise known as WolfC.
It's a great name. Whoever thought of that is a really good guy. So
So it starts off where you're funding the Wolfpack, but it sounds like you're going to be creating a competition once. So right now you are pretty much committed to seeing FlipSat fly to launch, right?
Yeah. So FlipSat is essentially a proof of concept to make sure that both the funding aspect, that it's possible to launch a student-built satellite at the secondary level entirely through the private sector without federal funding. And the second component, the educational component of WolfC, haven't talked about that extensively yet, something I would like to do perhaps later in the interview, is also viable. And so far, FlipSat 1 has been an incredible success for WolfC in both of these regards. And given the success of this proof of concept mission, with a contract already signed, and we expect to launch in 2023, we believe that it is definitely safe to proceed with the announcement of the larger nationwide competition.
Right. So that will be announced on October 29th and 30th.
What, your CubeSat education conference?
Yeah, that's where William's making the big reveal.
Wow, all right.
So it's called our Small Sat Education Conference at the Kennedy Space Center's Center for Space Education building. So that's where William will be unveiling this. Hopefully we'll have hundreds of students there. We'll have a lot of university and I know the Naval Academy's coming and several other companies. And just for your knowledge, when we have secured our first corporate sponsor to provide buses to help students from, say, the Orlando area come out to the conference. So that will not be a deterrent for them attending. So have you finalized your timeline? You're going to unveil this in the fall. How much time before you think you'll announce the winner of the first WolfC high school ride to space?
Well, I think it depends a lot on the infrastructure we have at that point. Depending on how many people we have viewing those applications, the various events that could pop up that could prevent or allow events to pitch fest to occur, and also the feedback we get, because so far it's been very promising, the reception we've had to this idea. However, the time frame is going to depend a lot on how many abstracts we receive for the first round.
Right. Now, I think we've got time for about two more questions. Where will you be? I know you've got a number of opportunities to present and speak, and you've been selected to speak. Tell us where you're going to be between, say, now and September.
Sure. So in late July, mid to late July, I'm going to be going to Athens, Greece, to present at the 44th Assembly of the Committee on Space Research. And that talk will be exclusively on WolfC. I'm definitely looking forward to that a lot, and I believe that will be a very valuable experience. Second, I'm also working with my colleague, Mr. Theodore Ouyang, and we are doing a joint poster at the Small Sat Conference in Logan, Utah.
And that will be August. Yes, that'll be August 5th.
And September?
Yes, and then in September, you said to September, not through September.
I know he was wrong because I clarified with you today. So I happen to know where you're going to be in September.
So in September, I'm going to be going to Paris to present at the International Astronautical Congress once again on WolfC exclusively. And I'm very much looking forward to that. And I'm also planning on submitting a paper to the 73rd Assembly of the IAC.
So that's 3 international level events in 4 months. So that's not bad.
I think you're going to have a great opportunity to meet people there, not only who are going to be impressed with your philanthropic efforts, the idea that your young age, someone who said, okay, maybe this part of the aerospace industry isn't my thing, but I love this, and here's how I can make it fit. We've been talking to a lot of people on the podcast recently who talk about the importance of realizing that no matter what you love, there's a place for it within the aerospace industry, and you seem to have done that. At the same time, what I think is fantastic about what you're doing is you're providing an opportunity for one of your teammates. Now, I know that he said we only had a few more questions, but I'm going to ask a few more. It's okay if we kind of go over, since I know that we're going to put Theo in at the front end too. But when you are presenting your pitch, when you're talking about at the educational conference, right? And I know that you've already got funding for FlipSat. You envision currently where you're at to continue to be able to provide enough funds to, would this be like an annual competition that you're going to be able to provide funding for?
An annual competition is the policy that we're pursuing to the greatest extent currently. I'm also working with consultants and partners to determine if there's a more optimal way to raise and distribute funds. But currently it's an annual competition.
Got it. And then, so I also want to know, so I know you said it's a Wolfpack with the Wolf C is the funding that, but it's not exclusionary to Wolfpack. There would be other people who can apply, but you won't exclude the Wolfpack either. Like they could submit to you if they weren't selected, correct?
Our definite goal is to make sure that all students who are capable have the ability to apply in a fair setting for funding for testing and launch.
Right. And I'll share something I think we haven't covered, which is you were actually selected to pitch this idea at the Edison Awards at the youth pitch event. And it's from that event that you got connected with a West Coast sort of a startup venture capitalist kind of guy. And I know he is now counseling you and another one of your teammates on projects. So that bodes real well, getting that kind of world-class, consulting.
Yeah, I want our listeners to think about that, right? So our student project spotlights that we've been doing, this being our second in that kind of series, we're talking about kids who are still in high school, right? Who are doing real world work that is taking something that they're interested in and creating not only items for your resumes, right? But this is basically, it's a canvas for your future. So that's really admirable. We always end with kind of a last question that has to do with advice for people who might be like you. But I want, if there are people listening who are interested in funding your program or might know somebody who is, how can they reach out to you to find out about how they can get involved?
Sure. So my email is willmayville56@gmail.com, and I try to reply to all emails pertaining to Wolf C in a prompt manner. In addition, you can also reach out to me through Mr. Simmons, AIA, WC2T, and Blue Cube Aerospace.
Right,
Yes.
and we'll put those website links on the bottom there
Right.
as well.
Right. The Wolf C is information is shared on the front page, the homepage of wolfpacksat.org. And also our event website is smallsateducation.org.
Right, and we'll make sure that we link to those in the bottom as well. All right, William, we're back to that last question now. And so imagine who the Wolfpack is. We've got those students listening, parents listening, and we have other students and teachers and aerospace enthusiasts listening. So if we had some advice that we wanted to give, let's say a proposal wasn't selected and why they should persevere, or somebody who wanted to take a love that they have or to solve a need, what advice do you have for people so that if they wanted to do what you're doing, what do they need to know?
Well, what I'm doing actually is not that difficult per se. Time consuming, yes. Frustrating at times, definitely. But is it difficult? Not really. And as long as you find something that you're passionate about, that when you wake up you say, oh, I want to do this, and it's not just something you're doing just for the sake of doing it, then it's incredibly possible to succeed. For example, if your proposal gets rejected, then that's just because there's a better proposal. It doesn't mean that yours was necessarily bad. So next year, perhaps you'll improve, and the competition will be different, and you'll get accepted. And ultimately, my final remarks, I'd really just say, find something that you enjoy doing, find something that comes naturally to you, and regardless of whether you find it to be easy, difficult, time-consuming, or not time-consuming, it will be something that you'll enjoy spending time on. It will be something that you'll enjoy figuring out how to do, and it's going to be something that you'll enjoy doing.
Right, right. And if you don't get chosen enough times, you disrupt the system and create a new system.
Well, right. That's exactly what you
So
guys are doing.
yeah, that's innovation, by the way, is when you're disruptive and improve the process. So fantastic. Thank you for spending some time with us today, William. I've known you since about the 5th grade, and
I've known you longer. I'm pretty sure in 3rd grade when I met you.
but we're looking forward, obviously, to getting an update on this project down the road. We're very much looking forward to, if you're a company that is listening, a foundation, someone sitting on some grant money, the Wolfpack that William mentioned, we are a 501c3 tax exempt organization. If you set aside money just for the Wolf Sea competition, we will earmark that, and it will 100% of every dollar you submit will go towards William's Wolf Sea competition. So thank you, William, for being with us.
And I'll see you in Athens.
Yes, I'll see you there. Thank you very much for having me. Have an excellent day.